Imagine two people sit down to the exact same lunch. Same calories, right down to the last one. One of them slowly builds lean muscle, feels full for hours, and stays sharp all afternoon. The other feels hungry again in 90 minutes, stores a little more fat, and fights off a wave of sleepiness at their desk. Same calories, completely different results. How is that possible? Because a calorie tells you how much energy is in your food, but it tells you almost nothing about what your body does with that energy. And what your body does depends heavily on where those calories come from. Every food you eat is built from 3 basic building blocks, and the mix of those 3 blocks quietly shapes your appetite, your muscle, and your health. Here is what this video will make clear. First, what those 3 building blocks actually are, and why your body treats each one so differently. Second, exactly how much of each you should aim for, using simple numbers you can calculate for yourself in about a minute. And third, why almost all of us naturally drift toward too little of one and too much of the others, and what to do about it. Let's take them in order. The 3 building blocks. Almost everything you eat, once you strip away the water, is some combination of 3 things: protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Nutrition people call these the macronutrients, which just means the nutrients your body needs in large amounts. Get past the word, and the idea is simple. 3 blocks. Every meal is a different ratio of them. Now here is the part that matters. These 3 are not interchangeable. Your body handles each one for a completely different purpose, and that is the whole reason the balance between them changes your results. Protein is the repair and build material. Your muscles, your skin, your hair, the enzymes that run your digestion, the antibodies in your immune system, all of them are made largely of protein. When you break down muscle in a workout, protein is the raw material your body uses to rebuild it stronger. There is no substitute for this job. Fat can't do it. Carbohydrate can't do it. If protein is short, the building work slows down. Fat plays 2 roles. It's a dense energy store, and it's structural. Every single cell in your body is wrapped in a membrane made partly of fat. Certain fats are also essential, meaning your body cannot manufacture them and must get them from food. On top of that, some vitamins only dissolve in fat, so without a little fat in a meal, you can't fully absorb them. Carbohydrate is mostly fuel. When you eat carbs, your body breaks them down into a simple sugar that circulates in your blood and powers your muscles and, especially, your brain. Your brain is a heavy energy user, and it strongly prefers this fuel. Carbohydrate is the quickest, most convenient energy source you have. So already you can see why 2 identical calorie lunches behave differently. A lunch that's mostly protein hands your body repair material and keeps you full. A lunch that's mostly refined carbohydrate hands your body a fast fuel spike and little else. Same energy on paper, different instructions to your body. The goal, then, isn't just to control how much you eat. It's to get the ratio of these 3 blocks right. That's what people mean by PFC balance, the balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Let's put real numbers on each one. How much protein? Start with protein, because it's the one most people get wrong, and it's the one you should decide first. Here's a clean rule of thumb. Aim for roughly 2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. So if you weigh 70 kilograms, that's about 154 pounds, you're aiming for around 140 grams of protein a day. Why per kilogram of body weight? Because a bigger body has more tissue to maintain and repair. A larger frame needs more raw material than a smaller one, so tying the target to your weight scales it sensibly. Why 2 grams and not less? For a long time, the official minimum was set much lower, at the level that simply prevents deficiency, the point where you don't actively lose tissue. But not losing tissue is a low bar. If you're active, if you lift weights, or if you're trying to lose fat while keeping your muscle, research consistently points to a higher intake, somewhere in the range of roughly 1.5 to a bit over 2 grams per kilogram, to actually support and protect muscle. 2 grams per kilogram sits comfortably in that useful zone, so it's a solid target to aim for. And here's why you decide protein first, before anything else. Protein is the one block with a real minimum that you don't want to miss. Fat and carbs can flex up and down depending on your day and your preferences. But if protein falls short, no amount of the other 2 makes up for it, because they physically cannot do protein's job. So you lock in your protein number, and then you build the rest of the day around it. One quick worry worth clearing up, because it stops people from eating enough. You may have heard that high protein damages your kidneys. For people with healthy kidneys, the evidence does not support that. Higher protein intake in healthy people is not shown to harm them. The one real exception is someone who already has reduced kidney function, an existing medical condition, in which case protein does need to be managed with a doctor. For a healthy person, hitting your protein target is safe. How much fat you actually need? Fat is where the numbers get a little more nuanced, so let's be careful here. A common baseline you'll hear is about 50 grams of fat per day. That's a reasonable starting point for an average-sized adult, and it's useful because it stops people from dropping fat too low. But that 50-gram figure is not a law, and it's important you understand what it really is. The better way to think about fat is as a share of your total calories, not a fixed number of grams. A sensible range is roughly 20 to 30% of your daily energy coming from fat. 50 grams is simply what that percentage tends to work out to for a person eating a moderate number of calories. If you're a larger, very active person, eating a lot more total calories, your fat intake will naturally be higher than 50 grams, and that's fine. If you're smaller and eating fewer calories, it may sit a little lower. So scale it to your size and your intake, not to a magic number. There is, though, a floor you shouldn't go under. Because some fats are essential, and because certain vitamins need fat to be absorbed, driving fat extremely low for a long time causes real problems. It's not about muscle or energy in that case. It's that you'd be starving your body of materials it genuinely cannot make and cannot absorb without fat. So fat has a minimum you respect, a comfortable working range of about 20 to 30% of your calories, and an upper limit mainly set by the fact that fat is very energy dense and eats into your calorie budget fast. That energy density is the catch. Fat carries more than twice the calories, gram for gram, that protein or carbohydrate does. So a small amount of fat adds up quickly. That's exactly why it's easy to overshoot on fat without noticing, which we'll come back to shortly. Carbohydrate fills the rest. Here's the elegant part. You don't calculate carbohydrate directly. You let it fill whatever room is left. The logic runs like this. First, you set your total calories for the day, based on how much energy your body burns. Then you lock in your protein, because that's non-negotiable. Then you set a sensible amount of fat. Whatever calories remain after those two, you fill with carbohydrate. That's why carbs are sometimes called the remainder. They're the flexible block that absorbs the leftover space in your budget. Let me put real numbers on that. Say your body burns about 2,000 calories a day and you weigh 70 kilograms. Protein at 2 grams per kilogram is 140 grams, and at 4 calories a gram that comes to 560 calories. Fat at 50 grams at 9 calories a gram is 450. Together, that's roughly 1,000 calories, which leaves about 1,000 for carbohydrate, or around 250 grams. You never had to guess the carbohydrate number. The subtraction produced it. In percentage terms, this usually lands you around 40 to 60% of your calories from carbs. That might sound high if you've heard carbs are the enemy, but remember what carbs are for. They're your main fuel, especially for your brain and your training. Filling most of the remaining space with them is completely normal and healthy for most people. So the full picture, as rough percentages, looks like this. Protein around 20 to 30%. Fat around 20 to 30%. Carbohydrate around 40 to 60%. You'll sometimes see official guidelines put carbohydrate a little higher, starting near 45%. That gap is simply the arithmetic of protecting protein at the top of its range, and it's small enough that it doesn't change what ends up on your plate. Notice these are ranges, not razor-thin targets. You do not need to hit them to the decimal. You're aiming for the right neighborhood, not a precise address. And notice how the method builds in a natural order. Total calories, then protein, then fat, then carbs, as the remainder. Follow that order, and the ratios take care of themselves. You never have to juggle all three at once. Why we drift toward fat and sugar. Now for the question underneath all of this. If the target is more protein and a controlled amount of fat and sugar, why does nearly everyone naturally do the opposite? Why is it so easy to overeat fatty, sugary food and so easy to fall short on protein? Here's one widely discussed explanation, and I want to be upfront that it is a hypothesis, a plausible story, rather than a settled fact. Researchers still debate the details, but it's a useful lens, so let's look at it, holding it loosely. The idea is called evolutionary mismatch. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers, in a world where food was often scarce and never guaranteed. In that world, energy-dense food packed with lots of calories in a small package, was extremely valuable. A ripe fruit full of sugar or a fatty piece of meat could be the difference between surviving a lean stretch and not. So it makes sense that we would have developed a strong pull toward exactly those tastes, sweet and fatty. The people who craved dense energy and ate it whenever they found it were more likely to survive and pass on that craving. The mismatch is what happens when you take that ancient wiring and drop it into a modern world where fatty, sugary, energy-dense food is available on every corner, cheaply, in unlimited amounts. The craving that once kept our ancestors alive now pushes us to overeat, the very things that are easiest to overeat. Our biology is running old software in a world it wasn't designed for. That's the mismatch. Protein, meanwhile, doesn't trigger the same intense grab it while you can pull, and protein-rich foods often take more effort to prepare and cost more. So the natural drift is toward too much fat and sugar, and too little protein. Again, this is an explanation to reason with, not a proven mechanism. But whether or not the evolutionary story is the full reason, the pattern itself is easy to observe in modern diets. How to correct the drift. You don't rely on willpower to fight a craving all day. You correct the balance deliberately at the front end. In practice, that means one main move: consciously put protein first. Because protein is the block you're most likely to fall short on, and because it's the most filling of the three, deliberately building each meal around a solid source of protein does two jobs at once. It pulls your intake up toward your target, and it keeps you fuller, which quietly reduces the pull toward extra fat and sugar later. From there, the fat and carbohydrate mostly fall into place because you've already spent part of your calorie budget on the block that matters most and satisfies you the most. You're not fighting your biology head-on. You're arranging your meals so the easy choice and the good choice line up. And here's the reassuring part. You don't need to be perfect. You're not chasing an exact ratio every single meal. You're nudging a long-term average in the right direction. Enough protein, a sensible amount of fat, and carbohydrate filling the rest. Do that most days, and the balance takes care of itself. The quick recap. Let's pull it all together so you can walk away and use it today. Your food is built from 3 blocks, and they are not interchangeable. Protein is repair and build material. Fat is essential structure and dense energy. Carbohydrate is your main fuel. Because each does a different job, the mix, not just the calorie count, shapes your results. Set your numbers in order. Start with your total daily energy. Lock in protein first at roughly 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and don't fear it if your kidneys are healthy. Set fat next, aiming for about 20 to 30% of your calories, scaled to your size, never dropping to an extreme low for long. Then let carbohydrate fill whatever room is left. In percentages, that lands near 20 to 30% protein, 20 to 30% fat, and 40 to 60% carbs. Ranges, not razor edges. And remember the drift. Most of us naturally lean toward too much fat and sugar and too little protein. One possible reason is that our appetite is tuned for a world of scarcity we no longer live in, an idea worth considering rather than treating as proven. Either way, the fix is the same, and it's simple. Put protein first, and the rest of the balance tends to follow. Get the mix right, and those 2 identical lunches from the start stop being a mystery. Same calories will always be the same calories. But now you'll know how to make yours work for you. Thanks for watching. If you like health claims explained with the reasoning and the citations behind them, consider subscribing to Why Cited. The papers are always linked below, so you can check the sources yourself. And there's plenty more here to keep exploring whenever you're curious.